Hello, everyone. It is indeed my great pleasure to be part of the presenters today for in the first national conference on functional education, which is going to be held on 28th and 29th December 2021 at Binyaminu Usman Polytechnic, Hadejia, Jigawa State, Nigeria. Here is the title of our paper, which is Towards Data Analytics Approach for Monitoring of Disaster Management Using Machine Learning Techniques, which is a systematic literature review. Here are my co-authors: Awal Saleh, Musa M, Muhammad S, Baroji S, Adam AA, and AA Isa. Here is the presentation outline. So I have 5 items to present today, which covers the introduction part, methodology part, results and discussion, conclusion, and references. Let's begin with the first item, which is the introduction. So from the title of this research paper, you can see that Towards Data Analytic Approach for Monitoring of Disaster Management Using Machine Learning Techniques. So let's begin with the overview of the disaster management. What is disaster? As defined by the United Nations, disaster is a serious disruption of functional community or a society. This is the reference by United Nations 2016 report. So there are 4 types of disaster. Number one, from Encyclopedia 2020, and all the references is going to be provided at the end of this presentation. So the 4 types of disaster that we have. Number 1 is natural disaster, example like floods, earthquake, volcano, and etc. Then the second types of disaster that we have is environmental disaster, example soil erosion, pollution, and etc. Then the third one is complex disaster. An example of complex disaster is like communal clash, such and like religious conflicts, and etc. Then the last one, which is the fourth, the number 4 types of the disaster is pandemic disaster, which is and the examples is Ebola, HIV/AIDS, COVID-19, and etc. And the reason why I put the red color, because the study focus area is for the COVID-19. This is the definition of the disaster, and these are the types of the disaster that we have. So definitely when a disaster happens, there must be a way of managing that disaster. So there are 4 phases. There are 4 phases of disaster management, and these are the 4 phases. We have mitigation, preparedness, disaster response, that is response planning, and recovery. These are the 4 phases of disaster management that we have. So in this research, we focus on the response, that is the emergency response. This is the focus area of this research. So like the COVID-19 happens, and what kind of the response does the government is giving to the community or to the people, to the citizens. So this research focuses on the COVID-19 and also an emergency response under the disaster management, how to tackle the happenings of the disaster. This is the continuation of the introduction part. So why conducting this research? This is the problem statement. Emergency response, which is humanitarian relief aid in the context of disaster management using machine learning algorithm. So this is the focus area, like I explained earlier. And the second one is existing studies conducted on the COVID-19 pandemic are majorly categorized into outbreak prediction. So that means there is a gap in disaster research that focuses on the relief aid materials to the vulnerable citizens. So what is the aims of this research? The main aim of this research is to collect data from reputable research databases on opinion mining and sentiment analysis related to disaster management and emergency response, specifically on COVID-19 palliatives and relief aid packages distribution to vulnerable people during emergency responses. So this is the main aim of this research. And what is the scope area? And the scope area of this research is systematic literature review, because this research, from the title you can see that it's a systematic literature review research, and it's going to cover the COVID-19 palliatives and relief aid distribution, sentiment analysis, machine learning algorithms, and the data that is going to be collected is the data that has been collected is going to be focused on only the Twitter social media data, then digital libraries from 2012 to 2020. So the data is going to be collected from Scopus and ProQuest databases. So, and the data that is going to be collected is from 2012 to 2020, and to fine tune the data and see the papers that are relevant to this scope of the research. What is systematic literature review? Because the whole paper is a systematic literature review. A systematic literature review attempt to collect all empirical evidence that fit pre-specified eligibility criteria in order to answer a specific research question. So it uses explicit systematic methods that are selected with a view of minimizing bias, thus providing more reliable findings from which conclusion can be drawn and a decision made. So this is the overview of systematic literature review. So why we need systematic literature review? To minimize the impact of bias or errors. And it also can help to end confusion, and it also highlights where there is not sufficient evidences, and combining findings from different studies that can highlight new findings, then it can mitigate the need for further trials. So this is all about the concept or the overview on the systematic literature review. So the next item from this presentation is methodology after the introduction, because this research work is a systematic literature review. So from the previous definition of systematic literature review, we can find out that in systematic literature review, it's all about asking a research question or formulating a research question, and at the end of the day, to answer those research questions. So in this research, 4 research questions were formulated. Research question number 1 is, what are the relevant papers for disaster management responses on COVID-19 palliatives and relief aid packages? And number 2 is, which machine learning techniques are frequently used on Twitter data? Number 3 research question is, what are the most popular machine learning classifiers used for opinion mining and sentiment analysis? And number 4, that is the research question number 4, is, what are the limitations of the current research? So these are the 4 research questions that has been formulated in this research paper, and they are going to be answered. So how to answer the research questions? So a Prisma framework technique is being employed or is being adopted in this research paper. So what is Prisma framework? Prisma framework is preferred reporting items for systematic literature review and meta analysis. This is the full meaning of the acronym Prisma. So this Prisma framework technique has been adopted to answer the formulated research questions in this paper. So and the Prisma framework contains 4 items. Number 1, identification. So from the identification side, we have to set up the keyword formulation, searching criteria using databases, record extraction. All these items are under the identification, under the Prisma framework. Then the next thing is screening. After collecting the data, you have to screen the data. So inclusion and exclusion criteria is under screening. Then the next thing is eligibility criteria, which is the quality assessment. Then the last one is included. That is the final number of the articles being included after the screening. So this is the way that the research questions is going to be answered. After the methodology, this is the result and discussion. So after collecting the data, then the next thing is the analysis. So the Prisma framework that has been used in this research, this is the result after employing the Prisma framework. So you can see the 4 items of the Prisma framework are 4: identification, screening, eligibility, and inclusion. So for the identification part, a record identified through databases searching. So like I mentioned earlier, that the databases that has been chosen are 2: Scopus and ProQuest. So from the Scopus site, 396 papers were extracted or were downloaded, and also for the ProQuest site is 218. Then if we combine them together, the total number is 419 papers that has been collected. These are the papers that has been collected from these 2 reputable databases or libraries. The next thing under the Prisma framework technique is screening. So after collecting these 419 papers, the record included on the title, because now we are under the screening part, so 187 records were included, which means about 232 were excluded, which are not relevant. Their title are not even relevant to this research scope. Then articles included based on their abstracts. There are 43 articles included based on this abstract, which are 43 abstract were included, and the articles that has been excluded out of the 187 are 144. So these are excluded both, and their abstract are not relevant to this research. Then the next thing is eligibility. So full text article assessment for the eligibility is 11. So after the screening, only 11 papers that are relevant to this research has been chosen, and 32 were excluded. So finally 11 papers were relevant to this research. So this is the result. So these papers were used in this these articles were directly related to this research. So this are the continuation of the result and discussion. So does the research question answered the 4 research questions that was formulated? Are they answered? Yes, they were answered. Research question number 1, the inclusion and exclusion criteria shows that 6 out of the 11 final extracted papers focus on disaster management in the context of Twitter data and sentiment analysis using machine learning classifiers. So the research question number 1 has been answered. The research question number 2, 5 out of the 11 papers shows that the most frequent machine learning techniques used in the domain of disaster management, sentiment analysis using Twitter data are naive Bayes and support vector machine. So the machine learning techniques that are frequently used in Twitter data, that's the research question, has been answered from this research, from the data that has finally been included on this systematic literature review research. Then research question number 3, the most popular machine learning classifier used in all the 11 selected papers are naive Bayes and support vector machine. Likewise, research question number 2 and 3 are mapped together. Yes. Then research question number 4, the limitation of the current research. So research number 4 is findings reveal that all the 11 selected papers were not directly related to the main research topic, which is COVID-19 palliatives and relief aid distribution during emergency response. So you can see there is a huge gap in the available papers that has been written on the COVID-19 emergency responses. So these are the answers of the research questions. Conclusion. This study has provided a solid and a comprehensive review of related literature researches from 2012 to 2020, extracted from 2 reputable digital libraries, which is Scopus and ProQuest. Meanwhile, The study followed a popular and standard systematic literature review protocol called Prisma Framework, which had applied, reviewed, analyzed, and evaluated and the extracted data obtained from the literature databases that helps in answering the systematic literature review research question. So these are the references that has been cited from the presentation. Thank you for listening. I am Hassan Adamu. Thank you so much.